From the National Catholic Register, this is Register Radio, bringing light and clarity to the news and topics that affect your life.
Student loan debt in the U.S. has nearly tripled in the last 15 years. That's not without effect on the Catholic Church. A new study on student debt sheds light on the challenges debt poses to candidates for the priesthood and religious life. Father Scott Bahrke, now a vocations director in Memphis, was once saddled with debt as he discerned the priesthood. On the show today, he explains how the Laboure Society helped him pay his loans, making him free to act on his vocational call. Then we turn to a continent that's booming with vocations. Africa is the place where Catholicism is growing most rapidly, and many vocations have flourished. ACI Africa is an EWTN news agency now in its fifth year. The founder and editor-in-chief of ACI Africa, Father Don Bosco, joins us with a discussion about the strengths and challenges of Catholicism on that continent. I'm Jeanette DeMello, Executive Director of the National Catholic Register and Catholic News Agency. I'm your host here on Register Radio. As the cost of college has risen in the U.S., student debt has risen more than 66% in the last decade, according to the Federal Reserve. And researchers at the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate at Georgetown University, this is known as CARA, this group, found that the student debt of men and women discerning a religious vocation can be a barrier to entering religious life or the priesthood. So we're going to talk about this study, which was commissioned by the Laboure Society, an organization that provides financial assistance to those individuals who do aspire to serve the church as priests and religious. And we're going to talk about this with Father Scott Bahrke, who is an associate director of Vocations for the Diocese of Memphis, and he benefited from the Laboure Society's work. He now sits on their board, and he's with us on Register Radio. Welcome, Father Bahrke.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you.
I said I would call you Father Scott because we're both from the South, and here I am using your last name. But Father Scott, you've been a priest for the last 2 years. You experienced this wonderful work of the Laboure Society. As you discerned the priesthood, you had student debt. So what did they do for you? What did the Laboure Society do?
Well, first they gave me hope that there's an answer. Right, as I was discerning priesthood, I knew I had the student loan debt, and I assumed, falsely perhaps, or not, that it might prevent me from being accepted by the diocese. And so I actually didn't apply immediately because I was trying to work hard to pay off this debt. And so it was really frustrating. And so the first thing Laboure Society did was, give me hope that there's an answer, a solution to the problem.
Absolutely, and I think they're seeing that so many people are just like you, want to enter or want to discern more seriously, but feel that they can't, and so they've been serving people in this way, but have seen an increase, and I think it's that increase, or what they guessed was going to be an increase, that led them to work with CARA at Georgetown to do this survey. And so what they found, they had 275 surveys from institutes of religious life and 83 from vocations directors or dioceses like yourself. And they found that 80% of the diocese faced formal applicants with student loan debt, and then 70% in the institutes and orders. So that's a huge, huge impact. So what does it In what way tell me how the program works? You contacted the Laboure Society, and what unfolded?
Well, they work with you. First of all, you have to be sort of accepted or almost accepted, I guess, by your diocese or religious order. You can't just go to them without any kind of connection to a religious order or diocese. But once you do, then you go to the Laboure Society, and they will gather a class of 20 to 25 young men and women who are discerning a religious vocation, and they will teach you both through video training and then a live weekend in Minneapolis, Laboure Live in Minneapolis. And you work as a class to raise money, and it's through the Laboure Society, a charity, a 501c3 charity, right? So you work together as a class to raise money, and then at the end of that class, you are awarded an amount based partly on your work. It's a merit-based award, so it's based partly on the work you put in and what the class has raised altogether. And if that amount mitigates your student loans, then congratulations, you're finished. And if not, you go into the next 6-month class. So really, there's a 100% success rate. You go until you mitigate your student loans and remove that obstacle.
That's wonderful. And I understand that part of this training is helping you tell your vocations story. Can you share a little bit about that story with us?
Yes, absolutely. You begin the meeting, you meet one-on-one with potential benefactors, and you share your vocation story and how God is at work in your life. And then you go on to do a sort of a triune ask, they call it, threefold ask, of course, asking for a financial investment in the vocations, and then also for prayers and how you might work with them, and if they might introduce you to other people that also have a heart for vocation. But the vocation story is, the part that gives people hope.
Absolutely.
I say that because we, people are praying for vocations. They know that there's a shortage of priests and religious brothers and sisters, and people are praying for that. And the aspirants in this program are the answer to those prayers, right? God is moving in their hearts and is calling them to a vocation, and they just need to remove that obstacle in order to investigate and discern that vocation.
Yes, and I think that's something that really struck me. We do have a vocational crisis in our country. I mean, praise God that we do have men and women who are answering that call, but there aren't anywhere near enough people answering that call to become priest and religious. And I was struck in this CARA study that they contacted some 700 institutes, and, more than half responded. But of those that responded, 186 institutes didn't participate in the study because they hadn't had new applications in more than 5 years, or for some reason they no longer accept candidates. That was crazy to me. I mean, those are not the people that were studied, obviously. It's just people who had to opt out because they didn't qualify for such a study. But 186 institutes that didn't have applicants. That is serious. So I imagine the donors that are interested in this are thrilled to be able to help, Father Scott. And I know that you had interaction with those donors, both as someone who was seeking to assistance, but also as a board member. What do donors say about their involvement in this process?
Donors are thankful to be able to participate. Right? We all pray for vocations, but here's a concrete way you can actually help. Right? And so donors are thankful that they get to hear these vocation stories and talk to these men and women that are discerning a vocation. And so they're thrilled to participate, and which is funny because as an aspirant, you're a little nervous, right? We're kind of wired to want to help people versus asking for help, and so it's a little difficult for the aspirant to perhaps ask. But then when you flip the tables there, the benefactors are excited to help, and so it's often a relief when an aspirant talks to a benefactor like, yes, I'd love to help.
Absolutely. You, as an aspirant, had this community of other people who were in similar situations as yourself. So while you were seeking financial help, what were some of the other ways that this community of others like yourself might have assisted you?
Well, it's like running a marathon. The class is 6 months long, and so sometimes you're going to feel very energized and excited, and other times you're going to feel a little worn down. You're going to feel like you're in a rut. And so, when you are in that low place, you can reach out to your classmates who might have just had a great interaction and they're excited and they can re-energize you. So it's very helpful to do this as a group. You just know you're not alone.
Absolutely. And now you're in a totally different position. You are an assistant or associate vocations director for the Diocese of Memphis. What is your diocese seeing? What is the vocational situation there? And do you have young men, or I know you work mostly with men, but even you may know of young women who are also in the pipeline. What's happening in Memphis?
Well, we had great news this year. We've been actively praying for, as a diocese, praying and focusing on vocation. And this year we were blessed to have 7 men enter discernment. They'll be starting seminary. We have already several for applying for next year, and we will probably increase that number. And we have 30 or 40 names sort of in the pipeline as that are discerning, perhaps high school students or others that are discerning. And so we're seeing an uptick in interest, and
Wonderful.
It's very encouraging.
Absolutely wonderful. And have you actually dealt with this problem as a director, as a mentee, where a mentor, where you're coaching somebody who is facing debt as they discern?
Yes, I've served as an accountability partner or coach now for several aspirants in Laboure, and it's good because I've been where they've been, so I know what they're going through. And so when they're struggling, I know how to help them and encourage them. It's so great to see them kind of grow in their discernment, grow in their confidence as they go through this program. And by the time they finish the program, they're going to enter formation as a very well-prepared aspirant.
So this is probably a key question, and this could go for anybody listening to our show today. What do we do? Yes, we can donate, but what are some of the other, yes, we should pray, but how can we encourage people who may have a vocation, or I'm a mom with young kids? What do we do to help our church in this vocational crisis?
Well, I would say, of course, pray. That's the starting point. But also keep an eye out for young men and women that you might think might have a vocation, and ask them, have you discerned or have you considered the priesthood or religious life? Because sometimes young people, as they might be experiencing these things, might just think, oh, I'm all alone. No, I don't know who to talk to about this, right? But when they know that people are encouraging them, that it's something that they should and could explore, it will definitely help them.
That's wonderful. Well, we will continue to pray, and we ask our listeners to go to the EWTN app, and you will find EWTN News in Depth there. They covered the CARA study on their show August 2nd and the work of Laboure Society, and I invite you to check that out there on the EWTN app. You can also find it on YouTube, searching EWTN News in Depth. And of course, Catholic News Agency covered this story as well. You can find it. Study on priest and religious student debt finds it can be a barrier to vocations at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Thank you, Father Scott, for being with us today.
Thank you, Jeanette. God bless you.
You're listening to Register Radio here on EWTN. Stay tuned for more. We'll be talking to Father Don Bosco, Editor-in-Chief of ACI Africa, about the work of his organization there in Africa. Stay tuned for more.
Let's return to Register Radio on EWTN.
Welcome back. I'm Jeanette DeMello, Executive Director of the National Catholic Register and Catholic News Agency, your host here on Register Radio. I'm joined by my co-host Matthew Bunson, Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News. The church in Africa has about 250 million more adherents today than 125 years ago, and it's projected to be home to 1 out of every 3 Catholics in the world by 2050. That is why we are talking about ACI Africa, which is a service of EWTN News, Inc., a sister agency of Catholic News Agency. It was officially inaugurated 5 years ago in 2019, August 2019, as a continental Catholic news agency serving the church in Africa. It's headquartered in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, and is led by editor-in-chief Father Don Bosco Onyalla. And Father Don Bosco joins us now. Welcome, Father.
Thanks for having me.
So congratulations for 5 years of leading this media apostolate. The National Catholic Register and Catholic News Agency have carried news from ACI Africa, which broadens, our scope of coverage for the African continent. But that's not why ACI Africa was founded. It has a specific mission. Why did you see the need for this agency?
5 years ago, I was overseeing another news agency that was owned by the Catholic Bishops of Africa. They have an association called the Symposium of Episcopal Conferences of Africa and Madagascar. And that news agency was filling a gap that was seen within the church in Africa that was quiet about its own stories, its own activities, that the church does a lot of things on the continent, yet what is done is not visible, is not given media visibility. Instead, there was and there has been a constant focus on negative things on the continent, things that don't go well. And so the bishops thought that there was a need for this service to tell Africa's story from a Catholic perspective. However,
Wonderful.
They were not able to provide the needed resources, both human and financial. And so I was able to then move on to EWTN News when they approached me. And so I continue taking care of this need of information about events in Africa from a Catholic perspective.
Absolutely. And really one of those very important good news stories has to do with the growth of the church in Africa and also the growth in vocations. So let's talk a little bit about the growth. As I mentioned in the intro, Catholicism is growing fastest in Africa than anywhere else in the world. Why is that?
I think multiple reasons. There are multiple factors that have contributed to this reality, which is good news, not only for Africa, but also for the universal church. One would be that the missionaries who came to Africa in their numbers did a tremendous job in evangelizing. That they were able to bring the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ on the continent. And they also found a people who are described by one scholar called John Beatty, that African people are notoriously religious. So when the missionaries came, finding people who are deeply religious, they were able to then accept this gospel message, the message of Jesus Christ. And the church then that grew up was able to own this message through what's called inculturation. And so a way of making that message relevant for the people in Africa. And the church has also strategized that it's not just about a liturgy on Sunday, but that the faith practice underpins all the activities of the people from the family, individually, then from the family. And beyond the family, there is the concept or the reality of the small Christian communities who are basically families that are in the same neighborhood, meeting together within the week and being able to know how each other, is faring on, sharing their challenges, their joys, and also reading the scriptures and interpreting them. So this has been a new way of being church, and that it's not just about meeting on Sunday, but also within the week. And so this has helped in the growth of the faith on this continent. And the fact also that liturgy is vibrant, that when it's about celebrating Mass, it's a lively Mass. It's a moment of worship, but there's also a moment of singing and praising the Lord. And so it's not a dull moment. And this also goes alongside the devotions to the Holy Eucharist, to the Sacred Heart. And all these things combine in helping the young people as they grow up on the church, feel belonging to the church, and this has contributed to the numbers that we see when the Vatican releases them every year.
Yeah, Father, the vibrance and the enthusiasm of the church in Africa for the faith, for family life, for the liturgies that you notice, all of this was demonstrated so perfectly in the documentary that the EWTN News has just aired. Can you talk a little bit about your work on that documentary and why it's so important for the rest of the church to appreciate even more fully the importance of the church in Africa?
So in the documentary, we had the opportunity of having an encounter. So the EWTN journalists who came over to Kenya ahead of the Martyrs' Day celebration in Uganda on the 3rd of June. Before going there, we had an opportunity to meet some Catholic bishops of different dioceses here in Kenya. And in one occasion, we had an opportunity to participate, to celebrate Holy Eucharist with the Archbishop of Kisumu in western part of Kenya. And as you could see from the documentary, yes, the liturgy involves singing and songs that are in a way familiar with people, and that within them, then there is singing and clapping hands and dancing, and that vibrance in a way demonstrates also who Africans are, full of life. And so liturgy becomes a moment of real celebration.
Absolutely. It's a wonderful special that EWTN News in Depth helped to produce and air. Jonathan Liddell from the Register and Colm Flynn for EWTN News went to Africa and participated in these liturgies, but also were able to talk to so many people in the country about the faith and just really demonstrate this liveliness that we're speaking of. It's called Kenya's Booming Catholic Church and can be found on our YouTube page by just searching EWTN News in Depth, Kenya, Booming Catholic Church, and you'll find that special. I wanted to talk about Vocations because you can see in that documentary and in some of the coverage at Catholic News Agency or the NC Register, you can see that vocations are booming. And so many of us have had experiences of priests from Africa who may be serving our parishes here in the United States. You're sending missionaries to us, which is really amazing. What is the situation of vocations? How many are there? And is it enough to keep sending missionaries throughout the world where vocations are so low?
Yeah, when you look at the demographics and the statistics that the Vatican brings out every year, yes, Africa is the hope of the church in terms of vocations. And speaking to various church leaders here in Kenya, but also having covered the reality of vocations across the continent, the truth is that the seminaries are full, in so much so that the Archbishop of Kisumu here in Kenya told us that the challenge is now they have a waiting list. They have candidates who have qualified have expressed intention, but there's not just enough place for them in the major seminaries. And so they have to wait a year or 2 years before they are admitted. And that tells you, therefore, that the numbers are big. The numbers in terms of statistics, I was given a number of 600 seminarians in the 4 major seminaries in Kenya. These are diocesan seminarians. Now, when it comes to the religious, whose number I don't have, there will be more than this, because the number of religious orders on the continent is huge. Here in Nairobi, there is a shared college that has more than 3,000 students, and more than half of these students are major seminarians.
Wow.
And so that's just here in Kenya.
Very good. Father Don Bosco, I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing, highlighting the church in Africa. I know there are challenges that are also faced that were highlighted in that documentary and at ncregister.com. So I invite our listeners to go to ncregister.com and look up the church in Africa and read about it. We should know about this very important growth there. Thank you for joining us here on Register Radio on EWTN, together with Matthew Bunson and today's producer, Michael McCall. I'm Jeanette DeMello, and I pray that until next week, God bless you.